Today we are mounting a species Dendrobium. Stay tuned for all the details at the Orchid Hut. Welcome back. My name is Dana, and today's video, as mentioned in the introduction, is going to be a species Dendrobium by the name of moschatum, and I am going to be taking some Keikis and mounting them to a piece of driftwood, or maybe more accurately a piece of very weathered fence board. Okay, so before we get started on this, just kind of a forewarning about all of the noises in the background. If I go 2 doors down, there is a children's birthday party, and between the pool and the blow-up playhouse in the driveway, you may hear children shrieking. Yes, even from that far of a distance, children shrieking back and forth between the pool and the blow-up playhouse. And then one house over, there is a mobile pet groomer. And I think they must have to keep the vehicle running because of the tools possibly and running the air conditioning. But in any case, the vehicle, the mobile pet groomer vehicle is running and it's making a certain amount of noise. In addition to that, just a little while ago, it completely darkened over. It had been a very pleasant, bright day earlier, and all of a sudden it just darkened over, and in the distance, just thundering just out of the blue, and it started pouring down rain. You know how it starts when it's just those gigantic rain droplets and then the sky just opens up and it's a downpour. So we had that a little while ago, and you'll notice today some of what I'm working with got a little bit wet because I couldn't rescue it in time. So if you hear strange things in the background, it could be any one of those 3. Now, also, before I get started with what's in front of me, I do want to insert some clips because there was a little bit of pre-work here, and I've already taken care of that, but I did film it. The mother plant for this Dendrobium moschatum is huge. I mean, it is very tall and lanky. The mother plant is in a pot with some bark. Still, as I purchased it about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years ago. And last year it produced a number of Keikis, which I did not remove, but I decided that this year, because I just get the feeling that that mother plant being in a pot is just not how nature intended. This particular species orchid grows in open forests, but very much in a pendulous fashion. So the canes are pendulous, hanging downwards, the blooms are pendulous, hanging downwards, and somehow this very tall, lanky plant in a pot, and you'll see, when I insert the clip here, is just a little bit difficult to manage. It's extremely top heavy. Last year, it did attempt to grow 2 new canes, and they both blasted. So that was sort of another signal that this particular plant is maybe not crazy about being in a pot. So I removed the Keikis, and I'll show you what that looks like on an insert video as well. But you basically just grasp the base of the Keiki, not the roots, but the base, and you twist in one direction until it separates from the parent cane. And I did that, and I've ended up with these 5 Keikis with a pretty good root system to go ahead and mount and see if I can be a little bit more successful with this orchid in a mounted situation. Now, one other thing that I have done prior to this video, and I did it quite a while ago, is I did prep a lot of my driftwood and or weathered wood, and this was one of the pieces that had already been prepped. And I will insert a link in the upper right hand corner of this video if you would like to watch the preparatory steps for getting a piece of wood like this ready to mount an orchid. You know, if this has been collected from a place where it was exposed to salt water, you do have to be very careful to remove the salts from the wood, or if there were any, you know, lingering chemicals in the wood, you have to be careful about that. There are some considerations for the type of wood that you use, and you also have to be very, very careful about where you collect such pieces, because oftentimes materials like this, if they're in a state park or a national park, you know, they're not supposed to be collected and removed from the park. So the pieces that I have were actually purchased in an estate sale from a man who had collected these pieces, you know, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and they were being sold as part of an estate sale. So that's how I came about the pieces that I have, but be very careful about removing anything from a protected area. Now, the other thing that I have done is, because I'm going to be hanging this on my trellis, which is a new feature in my outdoor orchid growing space. I did that video a couple of days ago about the new bench for my orchid pots, as well as the trellis behind it. All I really need is this cup hook right here to attach to the trellis, and then down here I put a couple of cushioned pieces, because the thickness of this board is not exactly even all the way down, and this little bit of extra cushion allows it to rest against the trellis in a more perpendicular way, instead of being kind of angled downwards. So this was just a little modification to help with the board being a bit uneven. Okay, so the board is wet because it got caught in the rainstorm. And these are the 5 Keikis that I will be putting on this particular weathered piece of wood. And of course I'll be having some moss with those. All right, so next step is to kind of have a look at the sphagnum moss that I have a chance to work with here. Now, this particular sphagnum moss is again from Repot Me. You all know that that's one of my favorite places to get orchid supplies. This is really good, high quality, AAA New Zealand sphagnum moss. And you know, you can just tell that the quality is really good. The strands are, you know, not the long strand, super long strands, but there are some lengthier strands in here which kind of help the fibers interlock with each other and, you know, kind of keep it from falling away from a mount. So I know that this is really good quality sphagnum moss, but it is rather expensive. So I thought, well, I'm going to look on Amazon and see if I can find some sphagnum moss that is maybe not quite as pricey. And I can already tell by just looking through the bag of what I ordered here that it is possible that you get what you pay for. So let's have a look. This, I think, you know, can have a purpose in my orchid world, but I just don't think the quality is quite the same. This is Fontar, and it's sphagnum moss, and you can put it in animal habitats, you can put it in orchid pots, but I can just tell by looking through the bag that there is some debris mixed in. So there are what I see like little bits and pieces of what looks like stems and wood, and if I pull on a strand, you can just tell that this is a bit more chopped and smaller pieces. And when you're trying to get an orchid on a mount, this is going to be a little bit more difficult to get secure because the pieces are just going to be smaller and they're going to be falling away. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to save this, and when I pot an orchid, and I think I need to add a little bit extra sphagnum moss, whether at the bottom of the pot or throughout the pot or whatever, then I will use this because it'll be inside a pot and it won't matter. But I think when I'm doing an orchid mount, I think the higher quality, longer stranded moss will be beneficial. Okay, so first planning step here is to realize that this is the top, first of all. And you know, these Keikis grow in a pendulous fashion. So they're going to be wanting to grow downward. And I want them to have a little bit of room, and I want them to all be facing downward, but still, you know, have kind of a pleasing arrangement. Now, these particular canes here are bent only because they were reaching for the light at the point in time in which they were growing. And so I think, you know, given, you know, a little bit of an opportunity to be in their natural growing position, they will sort of straighten out, and the future growth should be a bit more straight. Okay, so I'm just kind of getting an idea here. I think what I want to do is put the smaller ones at the top and then put the longer ones trailing off from the bottom. Okay, so let's try that. I'm going to put the smaller ones a bit higher up, and I will probably do one clump of sphagnum for those, and then I will put the 3 larger ones down at the bottom. Okay, so let's just do this way. And I will have to do this in sections. I mean, there's not going to be any way at all, I don't believe, that I could do all 5 of these at once. And I'm going to step over to the sink and moisten my sphagnum moss. And you do want to squeeze it out a bit, because otherwise it'll be really drippy. And now that I sort of know where I want these to go, I want to put some moss under the roots. And then I want to be able to put the roots on top of the moss, and then put a little bit more damp sphagnum on top of that. Now, when I secure these, I always like to use my stretchy cord. Now this particular brand is called Stretch Magic. It doesn't have to be this one, but basically it's for beaded bracelets. So if you go into any hobby store and go to the beading section, you can find this stretchy cord, which I find really, really useful for projects like this. And the way this works, you know, you're kind of probably thinking to yourself, ooh, well, doesn't that deteriorate, and probably you should use wire. But actually what happens if the orchid does well, and we're going to assume that this one is going to do well, is that this stretchy cord will deteriorate maybe like around the 2-year mark, at which point this orchid should have had enough time to establish its roots into the actual mount, and really won't even need to be held on anymore by the beading cord. So as it breaks and falls away at some point in the future, it will be just fine, because the orchid will have already made this board part of its home. Okay, so I cut a smaller piece here, and because it's invisible, you know, you really don't even have to worry too much about where the knot ends up. This just, you know, to me just makes it so super easy to just tie wherever, you know, the 2 ends meet up, because it's an invisible attachment system. Now you do have to pull it really, really tight, and you can see there that I'm pulling on that knot really tight. And already you can tell that just with that one wrap, the orchid is already secure to the board with that sphagnum moss around it. Now, it does need a bit more. That's just a start. So I'll trim this, and then I will cut another length to wrap around again, just to make sure that this moss is not going to fall away. Okay, flip it over. And in this case, I do believe that this could be wrapped around once more, because I cut a piece that was long enough. And I'm just trying to position it so that it holds down as much of the sphagnum as possible. And just another knot right here on the side. And pull really, really tight. And then just clip off the extra. Okay, so there is the first of the two smaller Keikis attached to the board with the moss. All right, now we're going to tackle these others, which might be a bit more of a challenge. Okay, there's one. There's two. And here is the third one. Now let me kind of check and see how that's going to be, because I do want them to be in front of the board and not behind the board. So let me move this one. It takes, you know, a little bit of, you know, arranging and placement and trial and error. Okay, so let's do that. Let's put this one under. Let's do this like this. There's a little bit of a natural indent in the board right here, and so it kind of makes a place where the canes can sort of rest themselves. And let's see, let's just lift them up a bit and get a little bit of moss underneath. And some of this is going to fall away. I mean, it just, there's no way to get, you know, every little tiny strand accounted for. Okay, let's give that a try. All right, so another length of stretchy cord. And this I'm going to cut a bit longer because I want to see if I can get a few wraps on here before I tie the knot. I'm going to be quiet for a moment because it's taking a good bit of concentration here. I hear the screaming children. And I do apologize if some of this is going off camera, but I do have to hold it in such a way that I can actually get the job done. Okay. Whoops. And I can already tell that one of them is not secured really greatly, so let's see. I will be having to do another cord because I can tell that the one is not secure. No, but maybe it will be now because it looks like it did tighten down once I pulled on that stretchy cord. Okay, let's see. Yeah, actually it's okay now. The stretchy cord kind of pulled it in a bit. Okay, so now really all I need to do now is just add a little bit to these roots down here. And I might do one more gentle wrap around the bottom just to hold the moss on. The Keikis are pretty secure. It's just the moss that's a little bit loosey-goosey. Okay, pull it tight. A square knot is helpful, you know, if you can kind of see which way you have the strands crisscrossed. A square knot is helpful and, you know, won't work its way out. Okay. So here we are. Now, some of these roots are a bit exposed right here. But I think that's okay for the moment because I do want to watch and make sure that these little root tips are staying hydrated, and I do want to watch to make sure that they are getting little green root tips going again somehow, some way, so that I know this orchid is going to be successful. So they're a little bit uncovered right now, but I have a daily watering check-in with my outside orchids to see who needs a drink, and this one will be getting a mist on a daily basis until I see those roots beginning to get a little bit more established. Okay, so I will be sure to take a picture of this one on the trellis when I get it outside. And if you enjoyed this orchid video, please give it a thumbs up. The subscribe button will be coming up in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Click that notifications bell to know when I've posted a new orchid video. And I will talk with you all next time. Thanks for watching.